Hello once again. I would say good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is a beautiful thing of what's going on right now. We are here in a building that is 110 years old in Romania, but we are having representatives of cultures all over the world. And this is something special for us to welcome on stage Prithvi Tagore from India. He will share his more than a decade experience or more than 15 years experience of restoring a very personal car, a car that was received as a gift by his father. And he's bringing insights from a completely new culture in our presentation from India. And he's coming also with a very unique skill set, being one of the few tea tasters and tea auctioneers in the world. And I just understood that there is such thing like the champagne of tea. So with such a unique skill and just such a unique taste, he will be sharing his perspective and part of the Indian perspective about the long journey of restoring a car. Prithvi, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Buenos Eva, hello and namaste to everyone over here. It's a great honor for me to be here from India, and I thank Retromobil Club Romania from the bottom of my heart. It's been a wonderful experience. It's my first international Concordia Elegance, and I'm just so happy and thrilled with everything that I've seen and the knowledge that I'll be taking back with me. To all my fellow speakers, thank you. It's been very insightful so far. And to all the delegates from FIVA, to Tito and Gian Mario and Gautam and Elise and Johan and everyone else, thank you so much for this. And my Romanian friends, Vlad, Bogdan, Daniel, Ovidio, thank you so much for your hospitality. I'm having a great time over here. So, about conservation versus restoration, I want to show you that my car actually had very little to conserve. So my only option was restoration. This is a 1958 Mercedes Ponton, which my father gifted to me when I was 18 years old. It was a school graduation present from my father to me, and it was in bad shape, but it was drivable. And my father and I enjoyed driving the car for around 5 years, after which it had very bad engine trouble, and I couldn't fix it after that because I was inexperienced, I was too young, and I just didn't have access to the parts that I required. So it fell into disrepair, and thereafter we put it in storage, and after around 5 years sent it to a restoration facility. I was told it's a restoration facility which belonged to a young chap. It was, believe me, he didn't know anything about car restorations, and this is the condition that you see in the pictures. This is how my car left the place for this so-called restoration facility, and this is how I got it back after a year. They completely ruined the car. They lost parts. They messed around with the body panels, and I had to start from scratch. I was heartbroken because this was a gift that my late father gave to me, and you can see the condition, how much it deteriorated in that 1.5 years when it was at that place. And I just had to pull the car out. I was so upset and angry, I had to pull the car out from there. Well, this is in the second workshop, which belonged to a friend of mine, where it was for 10 years. The reason why that fender is flashing is because that fender was badly damaged, And 10 years later, when I had the experience and I had the access, I actually managed to get a fender from Poland, a used fender, and I replaced that particular fender. So after COVID in 2021, I brought the car home. I was just, not satisfied at all. 10 years had passed. I became a member of the International Ponton Owners Group, which is a global forum for pontoon owners. And 10 years gave me a lot of time to do research on that particular model. And I sincerely believe that research is the best way to go about a good restoration. Again, I'd like to remind everyone, I am not a professional restoration. I am a complete amateur, and this was my first proper project. I wanted authenticity. That was paramount. But I had so little to conserve, I had to restore the car. So this is the Ponton Owners Group. They're a fantastic bunch of guys. So my research led me to the Mercedes Banz archives. Thankfully, Mercedes Banz has very detailed records of the models they produced, and they have a lot of factory photographs. So this is my car coming out of that second workshop. This is after 10 years, so you can see not much has happened visibly. Again, 10 years gave me a lot of time to do research. I bought manuals, I bought parts catalogs, etc. And this was the biggest help in my restoration. The 180A, my car's model is a 180A, and the spare parts list was a huge help in the restoration. I wanted my car to look like this. That's how it would have looked originally. And this is a Mercedes illustration from the time period. So what I decided to do is actually, when I brought the car home, I have a little garden at home, and I shaved off 1/3 of the garden because I needed space to restore the car at home. And I made this little sketch. This is my idea of what my shed would look like. And so 1/3 of my garden went. And over a period of a few months, I built this shed at home. That's my friend's MGTC, and that's my pontoon on the right. You saw that the floors and the frame was in very poor shape, and I was determined to use original type panels for the restoration of the car. My search led me to vendors in Poland, in Germany, and also eBay classifieds in Germany, which was a very useful source of parts. All these panels had to be replaced. This picture will show you, I had to replace the frame, the parts which are flashing. I had to replace both those side frames. I had to replace the entire trunk floor, the cabin floors, the front cross tube, and also the lower section of the doors and the door sills. These all came from Europe, of course, because I wanted the car to look right from the outside, and the panels had to be the proper shape, because you can do it by hand, but you need a sample, and we didn't have a sample with us because mine is the only car of this model in my city, and there are 15 million people in my city, but just one of these. So it was a challenge. Of course, the front apron also, it's flashing. That had to be replaced because it was badly damaged. There you can see the trunk and floor panels, which came from Germany. The cross tube, the rear aprons. Now, I just want to say that, it's relatively easier in the Western world to do, but in India to import these parts is a challenge, because import duty is 48% on car parts, and it becomes very expensive. But this was a passion project. There are no exemptions in India for import of parts for historic vehicles. You can see a bit of the work that went into the car. This is when the side frames were being replaced and done in my house. I was particularly concerned about the wiring harness, because my car was missing its entire wiring harness. It had completely disintegrated. And that's the diagram from the Mercedes workshop manual showing the wiring harness. I was very fortunate to get in touch with a German person called Gunter Krieg of Krieg Cable Confection, who makes wiring harnesses for Mercedes classic vehicles in exactly the same color codes that it came from in the factory with the tags, etc. And I chose to go with it because 10 years down the line, if I have any problem, then I can just look at the Mercedes workshop manual and I can trace exactly which wire goes where and what has gone wrong and what needs to be fixed. So I'm glad I invested in this wiring harness which came from Gunter Krieg. There's another company in Germany called Werner Karasch. They, I believe, are the largest stockists of classic Mercedes Benz parts. And anything you want, you just open your catalog, send them the part numbers, and they have it. Even the Mercedes Benz Classic Center doesn't have these parts. But these are the links to some of the vendors that I used over the course of the last 2 years. And this is just one picture of the number of parts I had to get from the car because I was very particular. I wanted the correct fasteners. I wanted the correct clips. They were tiny parts, so they all came and I labeled them so that I wouldn't forget and I would know exactly where it would go when the time came. For the upholstery, there were 2 vendors I used, Steenbuck in Germany, run by Hoeg Steenbuck, and Mark Cornelius, also in Germany. His outfit is called Himmelservice Ingrid Oppermann. That I used for the headliner. For the bumpers, I chose a vendor in Vietnam because my bumpers were very rusty and in very poor condition. They could not be chromed. And there's this company in Vietnam, not just for Mercedes Benz, but for Volkswagens and Alfa Romeos and Fiats. They make stainless steel reproductions by hand, and I bought a set from Vietnam, and it's actually pretty good, and it'll never rust. It's stainless steel, and it's not over shiny. It looks the part. That is, I really wanted, things to look original, like it would have come. Like this is the wind lacing on the doors. It's called the snakeskin pattern, and Steenbuck provided this. This shot is of the Webasto canvas top, which came from Ingrid Oppermann. This is the bumper set that came from Vietnam. And I spent, when my car was being restored, I took things apart, whatever was there, and I started polishing them by hand myself. I didn't want to machine polish them. I thought that, that might be detrimental because these are old parts, more than 60 years old. So I just started cleaning them myself. I looked on the internet on what the best processes would be to finish them by hand. Again, some photos of other parts which I was very fortunate to get. Particularly, I was proud of those A-pillar grab handles because they came in an NOS packet from the factory, and you just can't replicate this today. So I was quite glad that I got that. These are again parts that went into my car, a whole bunch of them. And wherever I could, I used genuine Mercedes parts. You can see the Mercedes stamps, stickers on those parts. These are all parts from the 1960s. I had to buy the entire set of window winders and door locks, etc. My fuel tank was completely gone. So I had to settle for a new reproduction and all the rubber seals. And in that, those cartons you see, the windshield, the front windshield and the rear windshield, which I also had to get from Germany. It was a challenge, but thankfully it was possible. Niemöller delivers to India windshields. And then my vision was basically to have the car looking like it would have been in 1958. Not over-restored, but looking the part. And I think, Adolfo, I agree with your philosophy, regarding that, and with Tito's. Uh, it took a long time for me to get the gaps in the body panels right, because in the 1950s, Mercedes body panel gaps were not symmetrical. I mean, I have communicated and spoken with the forum members on the Ponton owners group, and everyone, even original cars, seem to have differing body panel gaps, at least in the Ponton series. When Mercedes came into the 60s, in the mid 60s and late 60s, the gaps were far more precise, but not on the Ponton series. So what I did was, uh, it was between 5 millimeters and 7 millimeters, most of the panel gaps. So I bought a polycarbonate stick, and I used to run it through these panels and mark out with chalk and get those gaps as accurate as possible. Of course, the internet helped me a lot. Professional restoration blogs and sites. Uh, I did a mock fitting of all the parts before they went for chrome, just to see that everything fits correctly, because I didn't want any nasty surprises after the car is painted and then having to alter certain sections to fit the cosmetic parts. So this is the mock fitting stage. Everything, I mean, the ancillaries in the engine bay and in the interiors were also mock fitted and then taken off later. Uh, you can see now the floors panels have been completely replaced, and that greenish gray color is what Mercedes Benz actually painted the interior panels, and they used this almond color, an off-white sort of beige off-white color on the undercarriage. I have no idea why Mercedes Benz did that. My Ponton owners group doesn't know, but the theory is that Mercedes Benz had a lot of paint left after World War II, and they just used whatever excess stock they had in various parts of these pontoons. Of course, every mechanical component was inspected. It was either rebuilt, or when it wasn't possible to rebuild, it was replaced. Uh, I want to show you the finish on the underside of the bonnet or the hood. I insisted on having this finish because my research led me to understand that the underside of the bonnets came with this crackled finish for heat and sound insulation. So I was quite proud of this, that we managed to get a product and use the process at my home. And after it was painted in the base color black, we painted it in the body color. This is the basic chassis from the Mercedes Daimler-Benz media archives, showing the engine of my model and the basic unitary construction frame. This was the first Mercedes model post-war which used unitary construction. It wasn't a true monocoque, but the frame was welded to the body, and that made restoration more challenging as opposed to a separate chassis and a separate body. Again, the subframe of the car, the Ponton models got their name, I believe, from this subframe, which inspired the journalists to call it a pontoon. Or the other reason could be the fenders, which were pontoon shaped. I'm not quite sure on that, but this is my car's subframe after restoration. These are various elements during the restoration. I covered my shed with plastic so that very little dust particles and debris would get in when I had to paint the car. I did not want to send my car to a heat chamber because heat chambers in India are not very effective. They don't change the filters, the dust filters in India as often as they should. So the point of using a heat chamber is completely defeated because debris still gets into the heat chamber. So that would have defeated the purpose. I did my best to enclose the area, and then I started working at home with my own hands on certain things like the instrument panels, the carburetor, and the fuel pump. Went to a specialist in another city in Bangalore. And slowly my vision started coming together. I sent the chrome parts off to a specialist in Bombay. He's the best chrome plater in India, and he did a wonderful job. But I gave him specific instructions. I said, I do not want over shiny chrome. I want it to look like it would have originally. It should just be normal factory finished chrome, not over shiny. And in India, that's actually a big problem because there are some cars, several cars actually, which have recently been restored, and they are so over restored. They look fantastic, but they look better than new, which again is a problem for me. Not for many people, but for me, it's a problem. So we rebuilt the entire car over the course of 2 years, and I tried to make it as authentic as I could. Of course, I had a team. I had an excellent team of mechanics, tinsmiths, a painter, an upholsterer, because I'm no good at working on the cars. I keep telling my team that you guys are the actors and I'm just the director. I can direct you on how to do things, and you have to translate my vision into reality. Now you can see the wheels of the car. Again, I don't know why Mercedes Banz did it, but research over those 10 years led me to see that the inside, the wheel wells were actually painted a military green, whereas the exterior was painted the body color. So, I mean, people thought I was completely crazy because that interior wheel well will never be seen. But I went with the factory specifications and I had them painted color matched and painted military green on the inside. That's my car coming together. This is the interior which was put together bit by bit, all at home, upholstery work going on, and finally, after the paint job, that's my other car, my Fiat Milicento. And finally, I had a car which actually looked like the period Mercedes-Benz illustrations. That's the completed interior of my car, and I tried to make it as close as possible to the factory illustrations. Again, I want to remind you, my car had virtually nothing. So I had to start from scratch. I really love this optional luggage which Mercedes-Benz offered from the period. And my search on eBay classifieds and Portugal led me to some sellers who were selling these individually. They are genuine Mercedes optional luggage manufactured by a company called Karl Beisch in Germany. The company is still around, but they no longer manufacture luggage. So I wanted that for my car. And then finally my car was ready, restored at home, as authentic I could make it. And to all the youngsters over here, I would say that an authentic restoration at home, at least in my view, is definitely possible. And I encourage all of you that you should try and do it if you want to restore your historic vehicle. You can do it at home, you can get good results. And I was actually very surprised because I have seen many well-restored cars from the outside in India, but when I've driven them, they drive terribly. The purpose of a car, as Adolfo said earlier, is to be driven. And if the car doesn't drive right, it's just not a well-restored car, no matter how good it looks on the outside. And my restoration would have gone two ways. I could remain true to the philosophy of Mercedes and make a reliable car, be true to myself and true to the car, or I could have deviated and been more liberal and, put wooden trims in the interiors, which my model never came with, maybe an extra carburetor or something like that for more power. But as I grew older, 10 years down the line, I was like, no, I want it as stock as possible. And why the quest for authenticity? I wanted it to feel like it would have felt in 1958. The company designed the car with certain driving characteristics. I wanted to replicate that. And I think at least that not only does my car look right, but it drives right. Don't take it from me, but several of my friends, my club members in India have driven the car, and they all feel that, it's mechanically just as good as it looks. And my father gifted the car to me after all. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2020. And I think he would have been satisfied and happy with what we achieved. That's my team who worked on the car for over a period of 2 years. And that's a happy me driving the car. And my car this year, when it entered its first show, which is the Statesman show, which is over 50 years old, and it's probably the oldest rally or it's not a concourse, but it's a car show and a rally. It was awarded the best restored car across all categories this year. And at another show, it was awarded the Resurrection Cup because it was a case of resurrection. It just wasn't a restoration. I had very little to restore. And since then, I've been enjoying my car. I've been driving it every day. And I'm very surprised with what we achieved at the end. And this is a small clipping from Gautam's excellent magazine, the best online magazine in India, called D. Rivas and Eves. My car was featured in that very recently, and it's also featured in the International Ponton Owners Group website as the Spotlight Car of the Month. That's my late father and me, and I dedicate this presentation to him and every friend of mine who helped along the way. And that's my mother and me a few weeks back, proudly sitting in the car. So I'm very glad to be here. Thank you very much.
First of all, I want to shake your hands because it's a beautiful story you just have shared. It's really a touching story, and I really love seeing the Prithvi happy face all over when you are driving the final product. You could really see how much passion, but also how much joy you got out of it. And it's a beautiful example of how also restoration can bring authenticity. And I would like to ask you in terms of how much you invested. Not financial. This is not a reason. I would mean I want to reference time. Because what I've noticed, you really researched every part, every bit, and you really tried to keep it as authentic as possible. And I guess that was also a very long and tiring journey, especially when you are an amateur, you never did that before.
Yes, this was a process which took 12 years initially because it went to 2 workshops. But when I brought the car back home, and I was again starting from scratch, it took us a year and a half because I had the knowledge. I knew exactly where every part would go. 10 years had given me that insight and that experience. As far as the financial aspect is concerned, I really don't want to talk about it.
Everybody could see this was not a commercial project. It was a project that came out of heart.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a passion project.
And that doesn't have a financial objective in the end or margin. No. So, are there any questions from the audience? Yes. Highly appreciated. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I have a question to ask. I want to ask you again. This is a question again for Adolfo, because he started the proceedings today with, as he says, with very clear and let's say clear definitions. What would you think is a situation like this where normally I would imagine a car of this kind in Europe probably would be completely abandoned and junked, would never really bother you. It's not worth the trouble. Here in this case also probably in India, it's not technically, let's say, financially worth the trouble, but obviously there's totally an emotional or personal aspect to that. Where do you is this a case of restoration, resurrection, or recreation? How do you define that?
Looking the photo, I think that was one of the very, very difficult restoration because you started, in effect, from a barn find, if we can define in this way, and you had the right mentality to do the things in the proper way, to do research, and to find spare parts which were similar to the original, and so therefore it was a fantastic effort. And I can understand your satisfaction to arrive to the end, because naturally this was a long process. And I appreciate very much the fact that you did this because this car remember your father, and therefore I think this is a love affair, and that is most important than any financial aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored.
Thank you once again.
No, you're still not done. Wait.
Oh. So now the real journey starts.
I just was very curious because I know that imported cars over the years, especially I think after World War II, were more and more limited as the years went by, as India built up a national motor industry. So my question is, how did this car end up in India in the first place? Do you have the history of the car as well?
Yes, I have the history. Thank you for asking me that question. I am actually the second owner of the car. This car was purchased by a gentleman in Saudi Arabia from the Mercedes Banz dealership in Jeddah. And he was posted there. Although he is from my city, Calcutta, he was. But he was posted there at that time. And he bought this car in Jeddah in 1958, and when he was transferred back to India, to Calcutta, he brought the car back with him, drove it as his daily car for at least a decade, and then when he grew older, he passed it on to his son, who was a lawyer, and the car was famous in the Calcutta legal circles because the lawyer, the son, also used the car as his daily driver right from the 1970s up to the mid-1990s. So that's how the car came to my city. It's originally from the Mercedes dealership in Jeddah.
I want to convey you some messages from Zoom. Fantastic stuff, Taggy. So proud. Finest pontoon in India. There are a lot of enthusiastic messages that you're getting also from everybody on Zoom. So very good, very emotional feedback also from there. I would also take the opportunity to ask you one more question. You had now quite comprehensive experience how to resurrect a car. What's next? Will you continue this adventure?
I have to recover financially. So I'm not thinking about anything else as of now. But what was surprising and what took me back is after this car was restored, my fellow club members, at least 3 or 4 of them, approached me and said that, hey, would you like to restore my car? I want you to restore my car. And I was like, no, I have invested too much of my life in this car. Not anymore. I'm not a professional restorer. But let's see. I mean, I love cars. I'm passionate about them. So something in the future, perhaps it's on the cards. And before I leave, I would just like to make an announcement. Gautam and Gabriella, I like to call her the boss lady. She's remarkable. She's so efficient in running the entire series over the last 2 days. Gautam and Gabriella have spoken to us, to my fellow club members, a number of times over Zoom on applying for FIVA membership. We are a small club in India, in the city of Calcutta called Classic Drivers Club. We are just 6 years old. We have around 150 members. And today I want to announce officially Tito and the rest of the FIVA delegates and to Gabriella that our club has decided to apply for FIVA membership, and it will be an honor for us to be the first independent club from India to be members of FIVA.
Congratulations.